I want to talk to you guys about a major news story, a major leak of classified information that has been posted online. So, a few weeks ago, without anybody noticing, some classified American documents were posted on Discord. And through time, eventually, those documents started to bubble up. And they were classified documents about American actions in Ukraine, about, aid efforts, stuff like that, that we obviously did not want out there. And then as the American government was scrambling to find out where the leak was, 100 more documents leaked on top of that. Now, as of right now, this is all of the documents that have been leaked. There's a possibility, though, that there could still be more documents that could leak in the future, that this could just be the start of the leaking. So I want to prepare you guys that this might not be the end. This could be the end. If you had to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say it feels like the end, because it was a lot of documents, and it's hard for me to imagine they would have even more than what has already been released. But a lot of these documents started not only appearing on Discord, but then some of them were like popping up on 4chan, some of them popping up on Twitter, and now everybody can go and see these documents online, including us. And so we are going to take a look at these documents today. The reason why isn't because I want to spread information that undercuts the Ukrainian war effort. The reason we're going to be checking out these documents is because they're already out there. They're already in the public eye, and there's no harm done by us looking at them. The Russians already know they exist, right? There's nothing I can do to take these classified documents and put them on a higher pedestal. And it's like, oh, Putin was watching the DylanBurns TV stream, and now, after all these major news stories talked about it, now he knows about these documents. So I want to talk about them. So what are these documents? So these documents contain operational briefs compiled by the Pentagon Joint Staffs. These operational briefs contain intelligence from a ton of different agencies, including the National Security Agency, also known as the NSA, the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, and the Central Intelligence Agency, more commonly known as the CIA. These documents are of all different styles. As you can see, there's documents on the UAF's combat equipment build and how we are helping to train new Ukrainian combat units, as you see here. Based on known contributions, training pathways, and projections, 12 combat credible BDEs can be generated for the spring counteroffensive, 3 internally by Ukraine, and 9 are U.S. and allied partnered, trained, and equipped. Of the 9 BDEs, 6 BDEs will be ready by the 31st of March, and the final 3 BDEs will be ready by the 30th of April. Equipment delivery times will impact training and readiness in order to meet this timeline. And it goes into a lot of the more specific details. As you see on the right, it said committed stuff, and you could see like Leopard tanks, and you could see T-72s and all this other type of equipment that is being sent. This isn't the only document talking about equipment. In fact, this talks a lot more about equipment from all around Europe, from the Czechs, from the Americans, from the Canadians, from the UK, from Estonia, from all over. This not only talks about the equipment that is being sent, but it also talks about the training that has been completed on the equipment that's being sent, and it goes into the timetables of when said equipment would be sent. So this is pretty bad, because now the Russians can look at this and they can try to prepare for it. So there's a lot of information like this. This isn't the only information that's been put out there. I could name all of it, but let me just name a few other pieces of information that has been put out there by this leak. On top of this, it has been leaked that the United States is spying on Ukraine in order to have a better understanding of Ukrainian combat readiness of the Ukrainian military engagements, since Ukraine has been scared to share everything with the United States due to fear of a leak. So, this is a kind of like I told you so moment from the Ukrainian government that they can direct at the American government. So, the other thing that was really interesting about this leak is it was found through the documents that was put out there that the American government's also spying on South Korea. The reason we're spying on South Korea is to find out, apparently, about how their internal negotiations are going on about upping artillery production in order to supplement the Ukrainian armed forces. And what we've garnered from that is that there's a lot of nervousness in South Korea about Biden directly applying pressure on the South Korean president to up artillery production and to send lethal aid to Ukraine, and they're debating internally how they would deal with a request like that. We have information that has been leaked on how Ukraine, and this is really bad, about Ukraine's air defense systems and how they're unbelievably they're unbelievably insufficient in supplying Ukraine with a protective shield against Russian missile strikes, Shahed drones that have been provided by Iran, or any number of aerial-based attacks. For example, just like, drone strikes, attacks from fighter aircraft. You get the idea that they don't have enough air defense, and their air defense is extremely under depleted. It also goes into a lot of the casualty numbers. And the thing that's interesting about the casualty numbers that were leaked from this is that there's two different versions of the casualty numbers. So the original version of the casualty numbers is this. This is what was originally on the document. And you can see for Russia, the assessed combat sustainability is moderate. 35,000 to 43,000 killed in action as of March 1st. 72 fighters and bombers, 82 rotary wings they destroyed, and 6,000 ground vehicles. And this is a rough estimate, to be blunt. The total amount of casualties for Russia, it isn't shown in this image, but is around, I think it was 160,000 or 80,000 to about 230,000. So very high casualties for the Russians. And the casualties for the Russians are actually substantially more substantial than the casualties that the Ukrainians have taken on. If you look down to Ukrainian casualties, there's 16,000 to 17.5 thousand killed in action, 60 fighters lost with 32 bomber rotary wings. And for their total casualties, it was something like 110,000, something in that range. So there is actually a decent gap between the amount of casualties Russia's taken in comparison to Ukraine, almost like a 1-to-2 ratio. If you go for the higher end of the Russian casualties, we're talking about for every 1 Ukrainian dead, we have 2 Russian dead. If you can look at it right here, it is true. If you look at the KIA, for every 1 Ukrainian dead, you have 1 Russian dead. And for every 1 Ukrainian wounded, you have 2 Russian wounded. This actually caused a lot of Russians to say this entire leak is actually an op. And there's a lot of debate online of if this leak is an op. There are Ukrainians saying that this has been altered, that this is meant to, dissuade Ukraine from going through with the counteroffensive, to bring down the morale of Ukraine, to make them unsure of going through with the counteroffensive. The Russians are saying, some of the Russian military bloggers are saying that this is an op, because when you see these numbers, they're like, this can't possibly be true. It can't possibly be true that Russia is taking more casualties in Ukraine. So it has to be an op. It has to be a Western intelligence disinformation campaign. Don't trust the West. But this is actually not even the only prediction for war dead that was put out. There's actually the same exact image has been put out, but the numbers have been basically switched. As you can see here, in this version of the image, Russia's war dead is 16 to 17.5K, and Ukraine's war dead is all the way up to 71,000. The United States government has confirmed this leak. That's something that probably should have led with earlier. But the one thing they wanted to make clear is that some of the contents of the leak had been altered by other forces, most likely Russia, in order to make it look worse. And so one of the things that had been altered that they directly pointed to was the kill count. And so this right here is the altered version of the kill count. There's a reason why this image is a little bit more blurry. But there's so many of these documents. I could spend all day going through them with you. I already went through how the document talking about how the United States government is arming Ukraine, and when exactly the weapons deliveries are, and how we're helping to train Ukraine, and when those trained troops would be ready. There's daily updates that were leaked here that goes into a bunch of details, about a bunch of stuff. There's a ton of stuff here. Look at all this. Look at all this stuff, man. There's so much here. There's so many documents. Over 100 documents have been leaked of varying different levels of importance. So let me start with my conclusions, when I'm like talking about what I think about this whole fiasco, let me start with the positives, because there is some like silver linings here. The first silver lining is that there is a good, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. The Ukrainian government is kind of reassured by the fact that this is old. This is from February to March, and now we're in April. So a lot of the information that could have been more useful earlier on, or a lot of the information that could have been useful at some point, is no longer useful because time has passed, and a lot of the information that is in these briefs is no longer useful. As in, it could have been maybe useful a few weeks ago, but is now not useful. And a lot of the information has probably changed since these reports were garnered, were gathered by the American government. So that's the first silver lining. The second silver lining that I want to put out there is that most likely this doesn't contain information so far. Maybe there's more documents released in the future, but it wouldn't make sense for them to release these documents. They'd probably keep them to themselves. There's no documents that have been shown that contains specific information about when the Ukrainian spring counteroffensive is going to happen, or exactly where it's going to happen, right? It has some information about, you know, how deeply embedded the American government has gotten when it comes to Russian intelligence, and how we're getting a ton of intel from them, how we know how the Russian government is preparing for the American Western tank shipments by trying to train Russian soldiers on the vulnerabilities of these tanks and doing certain types of fire drills. We know a bunch of we got so much information from it, but none of the information is about the specific date of when they're going to launch the counteroffensive and where they're going to launch the counteroffensive. So a lot of those specifics that would be the crown jewels of an intel leak, the Russians did not get. That is not out there, and that's something we can rest assured with. And with time, this information is going to become more and more useless, since these are daily updates. A lot of these things are daily updates, and with time, they're just not going to be helpful anymore, because 3 months from now, you're not going to be hearing any more information about when these American troops, these Ukrainian troops getting trained, are going to be deployed, because, you know, it ends in April. So anything in May, June, July, they just don't have that. So those are the two positives. Now, let's go into the many negatives of what this has garnered. First off, it's unbelievably humiliating for the United States. It really is a big blow to the prestige of not only the United States, but all of the Five Eyes, which is a community of nations that shares intelligence: the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. This is very humiliating for them and a big blight on their record. The other thing that I am really worried about is the possibility this has to cause disunity in the alliance. Now, obviously, it being exposed that the United States government is spying on its allies is bad and can cause disunity. Now, this isn't unexpected. Most governments know that allies spy on each other. They might not spy on each other to the same extent that enemies spy on each other, but they do spy on each other. The UK spies on the United States spies on the UK. Everybody's spying on everybody to some extent. But it being talked about publicly can cause friction, as the public of any of these countries could say, hey, I just found out the American government's spying on us. I don't like that. I thought they were our friends. And then that causes disunity. But the biggest negative here, wait, one more negative before I get to the biggest negative. This could compromise something that's been a major advantage for the United States during this war, which is how deep we've gotten our sources into the Russian government. One thing I have garnered from this report that is a little bit reassuring, but is now concerning because that can be undone, is that we are deep in the Russian government. We are constantly absorbing information. We're learning about strikes before they happen. We're learning about new things that Russians are going to be doing in Ukraine before they happen. Like specific airstrikes on specific locations, specific drone strikes, specific missile strikes, and like locations like Odessa. We're learning about them before they happen, and then we transfer that information to Ukraine so they can save lives, they can save ammunition, they can save equipment. Now, with Russia having that information kind of, released to the public, they could try to do things to not only save face, but try to protect their information more in the future. I think there was a specific example that was brought up by a New York Times article that had only gotten through 50 of the documents. And that's something else, by the way. They're still going through the documents. All these news agencies are still going through the documents that have already been released. That's not even to say the possibility of you know, more documents are being released. We're not even talking about that. More documents can be released that the news agencies will have to go through. But the documents that are out, I think the New York Times only went through like 50 of them to release the article that they already have. But one specific example that the New York Times article gave when talking about how we've embedded ourselves into the Russian government to get this intel is that a top secret document, a document that was marked top secret, discussed the Russian General Staff's plans to counter tanks in NATO countries by creating different fire zones. Oh, I already talked about that. Where is it? Here it is. One section of the documents is categorized as coming from the CIA Daily Intelligence Update. The material in that section reveals not just who the CIA is spying on, but some details on how. One intelligence report, for example, demonstrates that the CIA is using intercepted communications to spy on discussions inside the Russian Defense Ministry. So learning about methods of spying and learning about where we're spying and learning about the specifics of the information we're garnering could make it easier for the Russian government to try to crack down on the sources. Now, we have no evidence yet that the Russian government has been able to use this information to crack down on those sources, but that is a possibility. And if we lose that intelligence edge, that could potentially lead to the deaths, pointless deaths of thousands of more Ukrainians than necessary and lead to some tactical defeats on the battlefield. And so I'm hoping that that doesn't extend into an intelligence failure when it comes to our deep embedded how deep we've gotten ourselves embedded into the Russian government in garnering our intelligence. I really, really, really do not want that. Okay, now what is the very, very bad part of this? Because I've already named some of the bad parts, but what's the biggest bad, the biggest baddie here? The biggest bad here is that it has been very difficult to convince the Ukrainians to share intelligence and share information and share their plans with the American government. Now, the American government and the Ukrainian government have worked together a lot during this war. We have shared a lot of intelligence with the Ukrainians. We have sent a lot of weapons to the Ukrainians. We are currently training large swaths of their military for the counter-offensive, as this document kind of revealed. 9 of the 12 new brigades that are being formed are being trained by American personnel. Some of which are already ready because they were ready by March 30th, and 3 more that are going to be ready by the end of this month, right? That cooperation has been extremely successful. We have, and I remember reading a report about this, and I double checked with some friends of mine, and they said, yeah, that's true. The Ukrainians would find a location that they want to strike with the HIMARS rockets, the HIMARS weapon system that we sent them, and they'll send the location to us. Somewhere in American command in Europe, and in like about 5 minutes, that American command will respond saying, yeah, I do think that's a good target, and here's some more precise coordinates, good luck, and then they'll go strike the target, boom. That's how integrated some of our support for Ukraine has been with American command and Ukrainian forces on the ground. So very integrated. And the more integrated it has gotten, the more effective the Ukrainian war machine has gotten. With the more integrated we are, the better we work together. And so if the Ukrainians are scared that we're just going to leak all this intel out there, that we're going to show what these new brigades being formed, what compromises them, what are they made up of? Oh, we're going to tell the world now exactly when we're scheduling these weapon shipments so the Russians know in advance what we're shipping and when we're shipping it so they can prepare for it. That's a major failure. Oh, we're going to reveal to the world the exact nature of Ukrainian air defense so the Russians can look at that and say, now I know where I can strike with my missiles. Now I know where I'm going to take these Iranian-implied Shahed suicide drones and target to kill the most Ukrainian civilians. This is going to cause discontent between the American and Ukrainian government when it comes to how integrated we are and how much information we're sharing. This was already an issue, leading the American government to feel like it had to spy on the Ukrainians to try to garner more information so they would know what to do and whether it was a good effort to back. And now it's going to be even more difficult to convince the Ukrainians that we need to integrate ourselves more and in order to increase our effectiveness, and that they need to let us in on this intelligence, that they need to let us in on these plans so we can work with them, so we can help them prepare, so we can understand when they ask for these weapons, why they need these weapons. Because a lot of the time, when these weapons are asked from Ukraine, when they ask for certain weapons, the American government is not really like in the loop of exactly what they're planning at any point in time. And so the American government could be like, well, we'll give you half the howitzers instead of all the howitzers you're requesting, when the goals that they're trying for, which could be noble, which could be good goals, could be goals of strategic importance, we don't know them. So maybe if we knew them, we would know, hey, we should actually send them all of the howitzers, because if we send them all of the howitzers, it's going to be more likely that they achieve this goal. So the less integrated the American intelligence and Ukrainian intelligence is, less integrated American command is with Ukrainian command, the less effective our partnership is going to be. And that's going to be the biggest negative effect of this. The biggest negative effect of this isn't even the information garnered from it. This information, the longer we wait, the less useful it's going to be. Some of the information is already not useful because it's like a month old, right? So that there's information in here that is damaging to the Ukrainian forces. Absolutely. There is information in here that is damaging to the United States reputation, to the reputation of the Five Eyes, to our reputation with our allies. But the main damaging point here is this could really not only affect our alliances and our coalition that is supporting Ukraine, but also the amount of integration we have with Ukraine and the trust in our relationship when it comes to the security of our intelligence. And that is very, 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 very bad, considering how important American intelligence has been for helping Ukraine fight and do quite well in this war. My goodness, man. That's really bad, man. It is really bad. Let's see if there's anything in here that I missed that I wanted to talk about. Let's see. No, I think I covered most of it. I think I covered most of it here. My God, man. This is bad. This is really, really bad. I mean, look at all of this. This is like an insane amount of information. And the thing that really gets me, it's not even just Ukraine. In the most recent batch of documents that were released, the over 100 documents that have been put out there, a lot of it was like on China, on the Indo-Pacific, on the Middle East, and counterterrorism. So this isn't even just something that is undermining America's war effort, our effort to support Ukraine in Ukraine. Like, this is undermining a bunch of other American, quote unquote, it's a buzzword, but national security priorities, right? And who knows if this is the end of these leaks. Maybe next, it's not just going to be all these Ukraine documents come out, but the next batch of documents is going to be maybe a mile high, 200 pages on briefings on China, briefings on terror groups in the Middle East, talking about special operations to kill ISIS leader. Who knows what's going to be released next? We don't know, because the American government has still not found the leak. They're rushing, while publicly they're like kind of trying to stay composed. Privately, U.S. they're saying that they're scrambling, trying to find out the leak. And the pieces of information they have to go off of is not the greatest, because these operational briefings, technically, over like 1,000 people had access to it. Like hundreds to thousands of people had the security clearance to access these briefings. And so when you consider that, that doesn't really like narrow down the list of exactly who the spy is, right? And so what they're looking into is like literally anything they can. For example, if you look at this piece of paper, you can see that the piece of paper is folded. That's something that they're trying to use to try to figure out who it is. There was also another one of the pictures that had like some magazines in the background. So they're trying to use that to figure out who it is. Maybe they're trying to see which government buildings ordered that specific magazine. Who knows what they're trying to look into, try to figure out who these people are. But so far, they've had no luck. I hope they find out who the leaker is, because who knows what they're going to leak next? Who knows what they're going to take next, post on Discord with some racial slurs or whatever, and have it spread around before you know it, everybody's either calling it a psyop, while the Russian government's using it to try to war plan against Ukraine in the war. And that's the big thing that's also I thought was kind of funny to me, even though none of this is really funny. The one thing that was funny to me is that the Ukrainians think it's a psyop because they know that a lot of these documents have been altered purposely by the Russians to try to cause discontent, which is, I think, a lot of the purpose of this is to try to make it so Ukraine and the United States don't share as much intelligence and information with each other, trying to mess with that integration. They're trying to make it so they're causing discontent in the alliance supporting Ukraine, right? So the Ukrainians think it's a psyop, but then you go on Russian Telegram and they're saying it's a psyop because a lot of these documents, since many of them are very honest, are about how, you know, Russia sucks and their army's not that good and they've taken much more casualties than the Ukrainians, and that a lot of their operational capacity has kind of been exceeded, and they've you know, kind of used up a lot of their military and they're not as strong as they are, kind of a paper tiger. And so seeing those documents, classified documents being thrown out there that says that, that's not just an American government saying that on a podium. That's not just some like U.S. congressman saying, oh, Russia is a paper tiger. These are classified documents that were never meant for the public eye. And if these documents were never meant for the public eye and they're estimating those type of death tolls for Russian soldiers, that means that's an honest telling. This is what the American government really thinks those death tolls are, and the Russians can't accept that. The Russians cannot accept that their death toll is possibly that high, and the amount of casualties they have taken are that high. And so most military bloggers seem to be saying this is complete psyop. And I was looking on Twitter as well, and a lot of those who support the Russians and support the Russian invasion were saying this is a psyop as well. So it seems that everybody but the Americans directly involved in this war seem to think it's a psyop. So maybe, you know, I remember I read one statement from a Ukrainian soldier that was talking about this, who seemed like largely unconcerned. He said, you know what? We have no clue what's real or what's not real anymore, so it won't have that big of an effect on the battlefield. I hope he's right. I really hope he's right.